Hi everyone, welcome to the Movieception Show. My name is Fariba, and today I'm super excited to do this breakdown video for the Hunger Games, the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes trailer. I promised I was going to do this breakdown. I know it's a bit of a late one, but I will explain in a second why. But no, I'm super excited to see this movie. I couldn't be any more clear with that statement. Having done my reaction video for, like, you can tell how much I really cannot wait to see this film. It's one of the few times where I have actually read the book before the film, and I can't wait to see what the cast and crew have done to really expand upon the Hunger Games universe. And as I said before, like, for me, the Hunger Games has been a big part of my childhood, my teenage years. I read all the books. I had actually dressed up as Katniss Everdeen for Halloween for both from the first film and the second film. So I actually dressed up in her gear, or not in her gear, but like kind of a mashup of her suit, like a way to kind of replicate it from the first film. And then I've also had the jumpsuit from Catching Fire. I actually wore that for one of the Halloween years. And I also actually have her Mockingjay pin, the exact one from the movie. I have that somewhere. As well as the fact that I used to also got my mom, I actually trained my mom to, you know, do the whole hair braid from the side. Like, I was completely in love with the Hunger Games. It basically took up a huge chunk of my childhood for a reason. And now, of course, when the prequel book was coming out, I had read it a couple years ago, finished it off very quickly, and yeah, of course, now we're having the movie, and I can't wait to really just share my knowledge of what I know from the books and how this would translate into the movie, and see how much of the movie is able to replicate content from the book. So yeah, I'm super excited to do this breakdown video for that reason, to really just, again, go really deep into what the trailer has shown so far, what they're implying, giving some hints and glimpses of what this, some of the sequences from the trailer might be indicating from the books. And that's something, again, I'm really super excited to do. Now, I will try my best to avoid going too deep into spoilers for anyone who has not read the books and really do want to go into this film with a clean slate, not having too much of a knowledge of what really happened. But I do want to warn that I might go, there might be times where I'd be talking about spoiler content. So I will just say here that if you are going to continue with this video, just know to proceed with caution. There might be some spoiler content that I will be mentioning here and there, especially if it is necessary content that I do need to kind of explain some things. But yeah, with that being said, without further ado, let's get right down into this breakdown for this trailer. Okay, let me just pause right here because I know we're only just 1 second into this trailer, but I just have to pause here because the backdrop is very important, because when you do compare this to the original Hunger Games, it does look very different. So, of course, like, if this isn't already implied, this is the capital in Pan Am. And if you were to compare this to what we've seen in the Hunger Games, it looks very different. And it makes a lot of sense why. Like, for one thing, it doesn't look as luxurious, as lavish as, the capital that we do see in the original Hunger Games trilogy. And that's just because, again, going into this movie, we're about to see the 10th Hunger Games, so that'll be just about 10 years since the first rebellion had ended. And if you know so much about, how wars happen, what's the aftermath of it, you know that whenever there is a war and a war does end, there's going to be some time to really rebuild from what has happened from, a battle, war, whatnot, right? And that's kind of the similar situation that we're seeing here. Like, I mean, of course, like, you can see, like, in some parts of the backdrop, like, you can see some of the construction happening in some of the buildings, and that's because the capital is recovering from what was the first rebellion. And yeah, it's going to take some time to really rebuild. Like, as you know from, some of the actual historical things that we've seen in previous wars, whether it be World War I and World War II, it takes several years to really rebuild a whole city, let alone a whole country. And in this case, they're trying to rebuild a whole city, the capital of itself. And again, it doesn't look really lavish, it doesn't look really luxurious, which makes a lot of sense because they're right now trying to kind of recoup from what happened in the first rebellion. So as you can see here, like, it just looks like kind of simple, construction, infrastructure, buildings that we're seeing. It looks nothing like what we see in the first Hunger Games. But again, you have to realize that this is happening just about a decade after the first rebellion. So there's still a lot of efforts that they're going through to rebuild the capital.
I am honored to introduce to you the creator of the Hunger Games themselves, Dean Casca Highbottom.
Okay, let me just stop here because let me just say, just to get the casting of Viola Davis and Peter Dinklage in this movie, it's just remarkable. Like, just to have such A-list actors just to join this universe is just amazing, because right away I can just tell how much they're already nailing their roles. So, like, okay, let's get right down into it. So, Viola Davis is playing Dr. Volumnia Gold, and as she is presenting up there, she is not just the instructor for the university and the academy, but she's the head game maker of the 10th Hunger Games, or at least at the time, the head game maker of the Hunger Games, and including the 10th one. And yeah, she is basically a big character going into this movie. She's going to be one of the things that you want to really focus on. And of course, that's because, for one thing, she's the head game maker. She's going to be playing a big role in trying to transform the 10th Hunger Games and trying to improve upon the Hunger Games moving forward. One of the big things about the 10th Hunger Games is that they want to try and elevate kind of the spectacle that is the Hunger Games, because, I mean, of course, like, the whole purpose of the Hunger Games is supposed to be a punishment towards a district for rebelling against the capital. But now, having said that, right, like, if people aren't watching, what's the point of having Hunger Games, right? Like, they want to do something where there can be some sort of entertainment factor to the Hunger Games, and that's what they're doing here, is trying to prove upon the whole idea of the Hunger Games, and that's what they're trying to do here with, you know, the help of Dr. Gold and Casca Highbottom. And now, Dr. Gold, let me just say this, she is a very sinister, very vicious character, because not only is she the head game maker, not only is she instructor, but she is a mutation scientist. So basically, she uses different animals' DNA and tries to create a whole new mutated set of animals, and that she typically does use for the Hunger Games. And yeah, let me just say this, she's very brutal, she's very vicious. I don't want to say crazy, but that's how a lot of people, try to describe her, as someone who's very loony, very crazy, someone who's really kind of out of this world in terms of the ideas that she does have. In a sense, you can also say that she is kind of a subtle antagonist in this movie just because of how evil she is. Like, she's a very evil character. She does some really brutal things. A lot of things that does happen later on in the prequel as well. And yeah, and one part of it is because of the animals that she does mutate. Like, the animals that she does want to mutate aren't so that, she has a specific purpose for them. She wants them to be very vicious. She wants them to be very gruesome. She wants them to be very, dark and, evil in a way. And that's what we're going to see later on in this trailer. Like, there's one set of mutated animals that we're going to see in the trailer as well, which I'll mention. But yeah, she's basically like an evil scientist in a way. And one thing I do want to mention is that going into this movie, like, I'm already anticipating at least about a 65% interaction between her and Coriolanus, as well as the fact that I'm gonna imagine that we're gonna see a lot of her throughout this movie, because again, she's a game maker but also has a really deep connection to Coriolanus. She plays a big part in basically developing and helping out Coriolanus to become this person, basically the turning point of who Coriolanus is going to be, his destiny basically. And that's something I'm looking forward to seeing here as well, seeing that connection between Dr. Gould and Coriolanus. There's going to be a lot of sequences I'm going to anticipate between Viola Davis and Tom Blyth because of what I've at least read in the text of the Hunger Games book. And yeah, she's going to be a really big and significant character going into this whole film, because again, one of the things that going to the 10th Hunger Games isn't just the fact that this is a 10th Hunger Games, but this is basically the breaking point, the turning point of who Coriolanus is, basically his transformation from this young, student at the academy to eventually becoming this tyrannical leader of Pan Am. That's going to be a big thing going into this film, is that we're going to see basically the turning point of who Coriolanus Snow is, basically the rise of him. This is what it is, the rise of Coriolanus Snow, and a big part of who helps him out getting to that point is Dr. Gould. So cannot wait to see those moments, cannot wait to see how she's going to basically, in a sense, groom him to become this big figure going into Pan Am. But yeah, that's one thing I'm anticipating going into this film, just to see this remarkable performance coming from Viola Davis, and just seeing this trailer here, she's already nailing it. She's just a masterclass. One other thing I do want to mention, of course, is the fact that Peter Dinklage is playing Casca Highbottom. He's also a very big character going into this movie, but not in the way that we see with Dr. Gould. For one thing, Dr. Gould does mention that he is a creator of the Hunger Games, but the way that this whole situation has led to this moment isn't how, we would anticipate. Like, for one thing, it's not like he intentionally wanted to create the Hunger Games. He actually thought of it as like a joke and didn't think this was something that was going to actually happen. but it did. And he's going to be a big opponent to Coriolanus Snow because Casca Highbottom has a very deep connection to Coriolanus' family, that is his father. And what really eventually happened is that long before, like, you know, the Hunger Games had become a thing and, you know, they were still dealing with the rebellion, Casca Highbottom and Coriolanus' father were actually partners in this assignment that they had to do. So they had to do an assignment together, and they had to ideate an idea of what they can do to punish the districts for rebelling against the capital. And, you know, basically, you know, what happened is that Casca did come up with the idea of the Hunger Games, but as a joke. But Coriolanus' father was like, oh, light bulb, this is a really good idea. But, you know, of course, Casca Highbottom is not comfortable with this. So what he did eventually do is that he got him drunk, got him intoxicated to the point where he basically did not know what was going on. And eventually what happened is Coriolanus' father basically put in the tweaks, put in kind of the finishing touches of their idea, their assignment to Dr. Ghoul, and turned that in. And again, at one point, like, Casca didn't think that this was going to happen, like, this was not going to be a thing, but then Dr. Ghoul is like, we love this idea, we're going to move forward with the Hunger Games. And now basically Casca Highbottom feels really guilty for basically presenting this idea that he never wanted to go forward with, and now he's using things like alcohol to really just kind of ease up his pain, ease up this guilty feeling that he has for creating this. And of course, because of the fact that Coriolanus' father was basically the main person who caused this to happen, he's going to have a grudge towards Coriolanus. Now, at this point, I do want to mention that Coriolanus' father is dead at this point. He had died during the rebellion. So, of course, again, like, this is going to be, you know, he's going to go full on against Coriolanus, again, for being being the son of the one person who caused him this pain, caused him his misery for his life, causing this to happen, right? And yeah, I cannot wait to see what they're going to do with it. There's a big thing that happens later on in the prequel book, you know, that leads to a lot of other things that happen afterwards into the book, but also, again, plays a big part in what is the rise of Coriolanus Snow and his eventual position to becoming the president. So, cannot wait to see this relationship, you know, being executed on the scene, on the big screen. And again, I'm imagining, like, Peter Dinklage is going to really nail this performance as Casca Highbottom, someone who's really feeling this not guilty pleasure, but this guiltiness of, you know, this guilt, this sin that he has to, you know, deal with because of his mistake of creating this idea. And yeah, this is going to be a big part going into the movie.
I have summoned you all here for the 10th annual...
I just want to say this, like, Coriolanus Snow, like, this is who I pictured Coriolanus to look like, and they could not be spot on with the visual of who Coriolanus looks like as, like, this teenager, young adult version of him. I mean, it's just remarkable how they are very on point with what we would imagine him to be. But yeah, I love this whole idea of how he looks. You're gonna see later on again how Casca is going to be talking about why they are summoned. They're all gonna be playing a big role of it. Now, of course, Coriolanus is a student at the academy, so that's why he is summoned here. He's gonna be playing a big part in trying to elevate the Hunger Games, trying to make it a bit more of a spectacle than just being something of as a punishment. But yeah, like, there's gonna be a lot of things that are going to happen, so I cannot wait to see how they're gonna continue off with this.
reaping ceremony, in which we choose 2 children from each district to fight to the death.
Yeah, so we know the basis of the Hunger Games right there.
From District 12, Lucy Gray-baird.
Oh man, let me just say this, like, the sassiness, the sassy bow that she's making, like, of course, the parallelism to Katniss Everdeen in the original movies, like, I mean, from what I've read, it was apparently an ad-lib, like, even Richard Zegler herself had, you know, admitted that this was an ad-lib, so I love it. I absolutely love the sassiness. I absolutely love this impression from her. I love this energy that we're getting out of it. I mean, just wow, like, this is just remarkable. I love this parallelism just to show off, like, again, 2 district girls who have been, you know, summoned, who have been, you know, put into the Hunger Games, and now they have to deal with this crap. And at least in this one, there's definitely a bit more context into why she's giving this sassiness, this kind of vibe of, like, yeah, I'm kind of upset, like, screw you, kind of sort of this energy. And that is because, like, at least with this, you know, picking, this picking, it was basically fixed. So it wasn't like a random thing. Like a lot of things there's a lot of things of why why this was fixed. Because there's kind of this issue between her and the mayor's daughter in District 12. And yeah, it's a really tough relationship that's going on around with that, and so that's why she was basically, put into the Hunger Games. Like it wasn't anything that was like done by random, but was actually fixed. So that's why she's definitely a bit more, annoyed with this whole situation, because she was basically put in there, not in a fair way. One thing I do want to comment, because I saw a lot of these while reading off, the Twitter reactions and all that sort of stuff, is a lot of people were trying to compare Lucy to Katniss Everdeen, and there's a lot of comments that really kind of, annoyed me a little bit, and that is like how some people were saying Rachel Zegler could not exude the feeling of Katniss Everdeen, or that she wishes that, she could be like Jennifer Lawrence as Katniss. Or let me just say this, okay? Just to respond to a lot of those comments, those tweets that people were making about this comparison between Katniss and Lucy as if they're equals or they're like the same character. Let me just say this, right? Katniss, aside from like, maybe two similarities, this bow that we're seeing, that's a parallelism, of course, and maybe their determined, feel of trying to win the Hunger Games. Aside from those two similarities, Katniss and Lucy could not be any more different. They're two very different characters. And the way that they, go into the Hunger Games and, try to survive and try to win it, right? The approaches that they take could not be any more different. So for Katniss, for one thing, right? Katniss, we know that she's a hunter. She was raised as a hunter. She was raised to basically as a survivalist. She has all these, like, instincts where she can, survive in a wilderness by herself because of the fact that she is an archer. She knows how to, find and hunt animals and all that sort of stuff, right? For her, she was always in this, this straight up mentality of, I want to win this Hunger Games and I have the abilities to do that. And that's how she used that to her advantage, using her survivalist skills to win the Hunger Games. Whereas Lucy, on the other hand, she does not have any of those skill sets. And her personality could not be anything like Katniss. Katniss was very strong-headed. She was someone who, hated the theatrics. She hated the performances. She hated doing the whole spectacle of it all. She hated all of that. Whereas Lucy, on the other hand, let's just say this. She loved theatrics. She loved being a performer. There's a background to it as to why she prefers that sort of lifestyle, because she has that experience. And so for her, she was always about trying to perform, trying to win, trying to charm people that she's meeting up with. And that becomes a big thing in terms of her going to this Hunger Games, trying to exude that charm. Like, in a way, we get a bit more of this Peeta Mellark feel with Lucy than really anything that is of Katniss, right? She has more of that Peter vibe where, she's gonna be smart, like, even though she may not have the skill sets of a hunter, of a survivalist, of a, someone who, like, military background to win the Hunger Games, she can still use her charm to at least win over, the people behind the scenes, the sponsors and all that sort of stuff, to get all these material and use that to her advantage to survive the Hunger Games. And that's how Peter played with the game, and that's how Lucy's gonna play this game, is using that to her advantage, to, using her charm, using her charisma to basically win the hearts of everyone watching the Hunger Games, so that she can use it to her advantage to somehow win. And of course, again, she's going to be someone who's more of a hider than really just someone who's going to go out there and go straight up like killing or anything like that. So just to clarify, Katniss and Lucy are very different characters. They could not be any more different. Rachel Zegler playing Lucy is spot on. Like, she's, like, just from here and having seen this whole trailer, like, she's everything I would have imagined Lucy gray-baird to look like, to really kind of exude this personality of who she is, this idea, this of who Lucy is. It's really spot on. I'm loving it. Her fashion of it itself, of course, is something I would have imagined as well, because, again, in the books, it is kind of described that she has a bit more of this gypsy feel to her, and that makes a lot of sense because of her background, of how she was raised basically in District 12. And yeah, again, like, Rachel Zegler is really nailing it. I think she's doing such a fine job portraying Lucy. And so let's just make sure that we stop all this comparison between Katniss and Lucy, between Jennifer Lawrence and Rachel Zegler. They're playing two different characters. These are two different characters in the Hunger Games universe who have different skill sets, different ways of approaching the games. And let's just keep it at that. it's not really necessary to really just, start comparing and, saying rude things about one person over the other. There's no reason to do that. And I hope that really clarifies a lot of things going into this movie. Just have a clean mindset and know that Lucy's a very different character. So I hope that clarified a lot of things right there.
There has been a change this year. As a mentor, Mr. Snow,
Okay, so there's a lot of things that I do want to dissect a little bit. Because again, you can see how different the Capitol looks like, how different the Hunger Games looks like comparison to like everything we see in the original Hunger Games. Like for one thing, you can see the aesthetic of it. It's not as very futuristic. It's not very technical like as what we saw in the original Hunger Games. Like if you remember the original Hunger Games, it kind of looked like, Katniss and Peeta were like in bullet trains basically, right? It looked very luxurious, looks very beautiful. They had like food everywhere and all that sort of stuff. Like they were basically treated like royalty. That's not the case here, of course, and that's again because this is the 10th Hunger Games. They didn't have those resources back then. It's not something that they had ideated before. So of course their treatment here is a bit more poor. As we can see from the train moments, like here where everyone's, all the troopers are being put into this one cabin, this whole one part of the train. And here again, we're seeing how they're all entering, how they're all arriving. Again, this is not the Hunger Games that we see in the eventual ones with Katniss. This is how the Hunger Games were like in the 10th Hunger Games, because again, it wasn't as futuristic, it wasn't as technologically advanced as it was in the latter Hunger Games. So yeah, that was something I want to mention. Of course, we're seeing Coriolanus Snow wearing his red suit. We're gonna see a lot more footage of it, so I cannot wait to dive into all the other parts of it.
your role is to turn these children into
Okay, I just want to pause here a little bit because you can see the white rose, and the white rose is a big part of his character because, again, it's not like as if this is the first time we're seeing him in the white rose, but if you recall from the original Hunger Games, he actually has a whole garden of white roses. It's a big part of his character, how he's really he really loves his white roses. He loves growing them. He loves treating them. And yeah, this is just kind of this is an early glimpse of him with the white rose. And there's a huge story behind it. It actually does get explained in the books of his connection with white roses, why he, is so, I wouldn't say obsessive, but he really admires them. And that is because, for one thing, because we don't see his grandmother in this trailer, but we do see Tigris. But for Coriolanus, he does live with his grandmother and he does live with his cousin Tigris. He's basically like an orphan because both his parents have passed away, and so has his cousin's parents. And so they're both being raised by their grandmother, who they live with in an apartment. And one thing I do need to mention is that unlike what we see in the the 74th and the 5th Hunger Games, where Coriolanus is now the president, he's living a very flourished life. He's living in a mansion. He's having such a really well, he's living very well and is wealthy, with this really wealthy life. That was not the case for him when he was a kid, or at least when he was a teenager. He basically lived in a very poor apartment. He did not have a lot of resources. He did not, have a lot of money, unlike what we see later on. He basically had a poor life, even to a point where it was basically poverty. He was dealing with poverty as a kid, didn't have a lot of money. And yet, with all that being said, one thing I do need to mention is that his grandmother, even with, the misfortunes that they may have dealt with, she was always about high standards, always about trying to present themselves in a very, very noble, respectable way. And that was like one of the things of why, again, we see, even though Coriolanus is here, he looks really nice, and behind the scenes, he doesn't really have that very flourished lifestyle. And again, one of that is because his grandmother wants to make sure that every time he's going out in public, he's presenting himself in a very well manner. And that's what we're seeing here in a couple of moments here and there throughout this trailer. And for one thing, like, his grandmother was really all about the white roses. She loved growing white roses, but she was very possessive about them. And so, of course, like, she wasn't really selling them. She really held them. On a few occasions, she would, allow, to get, like, she would give the white roses to either Tigris or Coriolanus on special occasions. So, like, for one thing, like, they'll put it on their pockets or try to give it as a gift to someone very highly, someone very important. That's what they would, like, that would be the few times that his grandmother would give him a white rose. But otherwise, she was very possessive of them. She really, like, attended to her white roses very much. That's something that we see, at least I remember reading a lot throughout the text of it. And of course, eventually, it seems as if Coriolanus inherits a lot of that, that love for white roses and that admiration for it. So this is just a glimpse of him with the white roses. There's a really deep connection to it. We're seeing it here of this big part, this big symbol of who Coriolanus is, of again why this white rose is so important to him, why it becomes such a thematic thing throughout not just the original Hunger Games but in the prequel as well. And that's again a big deep connection to him and his grandmother and his family. So I hope that really explained a lot of things about that white rose.
Not survivors.
What does my mentor do besides bring me roses?
I do my best.
Okay, I love this interaction between Lucy and Coriolanus, and this is pretty spot on from the books, or at least from what I remember from the books, because from what I remember, Coriolanus was one of the few mentors who had actually met up with their mentee, with their tributes. So Coriolanus was assigned to none other than District 12's female tribute, Lucy Gray-Baird. Could not have made this any more, coincidental. Again, probably explains a lot of things about some of the latter Hunger Games and Katniss Everdeen because of his history with District 12 tributes, such as Lucy. And because of the fact that, again, this is a Hunger Games where they're really trying to change up a lot of how they're presenting it, how they're trying to format it, how they're trying to structure it. He's basically playing upon his role of trying to be this mentor where he's not just, doing it only behind the scenes, where he's only caring about doing it when the actual Hunger Games happens, but he wants to also make sure that he can learn about who his, tribute is, get to know about her, get to learn about her, understand who she is, where her strengths are, where her weaknesses are, try to, trying to basically in a way befriend her in a way that, again, they can establish this close relationship, so that way it'll make it easier, not easier, but at least increases their chances of winning the Hunger Games, because again, this is Coriolanus's, status, because again, for him, he needs that Hunger Game. He needs this Hunger Games to really just show off who he can be, his capabilities, of what he can do, not just for the Hunger Games, but as for, the whole country of Pan Am. And this is just, again, the tip of what he's willing to go through just to really present himself. And again, one other thing you have to realize is, again, he's being raised by his grandmother. So again, this is him trying to show off a bit more of this respectable, well-mannered idea of who Coriolanus is, trying to show off that behavior. He's probably one or two. I can't remember if it was him alone or if there was one other person along with him, but he does meet up with his tribute and, presents off this white rose to her. And this is coming directly from the books itself. And again, one thing I do need to mention is I've not seen a lot of Tom Blyth's, films or TV series. I'm not really, well versed with a lot of his projects. So this is my first time actually watching a lot of his content. But I have to say, he's really nailing this Coriolanus, this manner of his. Just like Lucy is someone who's all about theatrics, a lot about performance. You can definitely get the sense of Coriolanus trying to show off this performance as well. You can see he is trying to present himself as someone who is caring, someone who is really well mannered. But again, it's just him trying to present himself in a really nice way, just because again, he has to. And again, when you can hear his voice, you can definitely get a sense of this fakeness a little bit. But that's who he is. That's how Coriolanus Snow is. This is what he's trying to do. He's trying to give off this vibe of who he is, but also trying to hide off what is actually going on behind his life. And we're seeing this right here, where it's he's showing off, this fakeness of his, trying to show that he cares about this tribute, but it's all about trying to be a performer. He's performing to everyone, and that's what's happening right here. Just to hear his voice, right? I was just kind of this is exactly what I thought Coriolanus was, and this is the perfect embodiment of how Tom Blyth is really portraying Coriolanus. So again, really spot on with the acting here, and wow, I cannot even imagine how else he's going to tackle this character, because wow, that is just really spot on.
To take care of you.
You really want to take care of
Okay, I just want to stop here because this is a really big moment in the books, and that is because they're about to tour the Capitol Arena. Again, we're seeing a tunnel of them coming out as they're going into the Capitol Arena. So, this is where they're going to take, this is where the 10th Hunger Games is going to take place. This is where all the 24, tributes are going to go in and fight to the death up until one person survives. And yeah, they're all basically all the mentors and all the tributes are going inside, touring around the whole arena to see how it looks like, to give them a bit of a better glimpse of what to expect. Of course, like when we go into the, a lot of Hunger Games, that's not the case. They don't ever actually get the chance to, explore the arena itself. Like they don't do that in a lot of Hunger Games, but this is a case where they do that. And yeah, as I said before, like the Hunger Games back in those days were not like the Hunger Games that we see in the 74th and 75th ones. That's because they didn't have all that technology at that point. It's just kind of what they have in their possession, all the resources that are available to them. And this is the Capitol Arena right here for sure. And so again, they're going to tour around it. A couple details I want to mention is on the right side, we're seeing like a camera crew following everyone, just again, trying to show off the spectacle of how the Hunger Games is, showing the behind the scenes, trying to, amp up the games up until the countdown finally ends and the Hunger Games starts. That's getting the vibe of right here. And of course, like one little bitsy thing I want to mention is the fact that Coriolanus and Lucy is they're kind of like holding their hands. Again, kind of just showing off like this, a hint of the fact that they're going to have a bit of a romance. And that's going to be a big part. Again, they talk about love being a big part later on in this trailer, but yeah, like again, this is really spot on with the whole books. One thing I want to mention, and I'm not going to try and go into any sort of spoiler, is that as they're touring this arena, a big thing does happen. A very crucial thing does happen. It's going to be one of the most like pivotal moments in the movie. Or at least one of the big moments in the movies, at least in the movie, just because a lot of things does happen in between this moment and leading up to the games. And we're going to see a little bit of snippets and hints of what's going on, and glimpses of it. But yeah, a lot of things does happen in this moment. So just kind of something to keep an eye on. I'm not going to go too deep into spoil of what happened after, but we can see again how they're touring the arena, some of the details of what's going on. And yeah, this is going to be a really big one.
Me in that arena.
And just again, you can see right here, a lot of the mentors, a lot of the tributes are looking around. You can see kind of like the pods standing where all the tributes are standing. This is similar to what we saw in the Hunger Games, where they all circle around. What will eventually be in the middle is like the corner, will kind of be where all the weapons are, all the things that they need to kind of survive, whether or not someone was going to go straight to the weapons to grab what they need and start killing off everyone, or are we going to be one of those people who are going to go straight into hiding because they know they have no chance? We've seen those tactics before. And yeah, that's basically the same thing here. We're seeing like these circling of like where all the tributes are up until the final countdown. We saw that in the original Hunger Games before, and the same thing here.
Start by thinking I can actually win.
Yeah, so she starts talking about how she can actually win. So yeah, this is where Coriolanus and Lucy are going to basically create a pact where no matter what Coriolanus does, he needs to make sure that Lucy wins. So that's going to be a big thing going into this whole Hunger Games, is that he's going to do whatever he can to help her win. Again, like he wants to make her win. I think, I can't remember how much he talks about Lucy and her chances of winning, but from what I do recall is that like a lot of people didn't think their tree was going to be, someone who can actually win. They don't have a high chance to it. And considering that Lucy doesn't have like that hunter background or survivalist background, like the way that we saw with Katniss Everdeen, like you would think instantly that, oh, there's no way that this person is going to be able to survive the Hunger Games. And that's something how a lot of people were thinking back in those days, of course. But yeah, he's going to do everything he can to make sure to win the Hunger Games. This is now going to become a pact. And the fact that they're having this conversation, it does give me this vibe that this is going to be right after this big event that we see as after they toured around the arena. Because again, something does happen in between, and something really big does happen between Coriolanus and Lucy that really leads up to this moment, I'm assuming. And so yeah, basically Lucy wants him to help her not just, increase her chances of surviving, but winning the Hunger Games, basically. So yeah, that's the one thing that I feel like, again, it's gonna be a big part. I cannot wait to see how they're going to play off a lot of those moments, but that was just something I wanted to add on to.
I'm Lucky Flickerman.
Okay, let me just say that, again, this is kind of how it was like in the Hunger Games arena, not the Hunger Games arena, but the kind of just the background of what's going on. Like, this is again, everyone in that room where they're basically coordinating the whole Hunger Games, how they're going to watch everyone. It's not like, again, how we saw in the original Hunger Games, or not original Hunger Games, but the original Hunger Games trilogy that we see, where everything, again, you can do touch screens, you can like use a pen to just add in something. It was nothing like that. Back in those days, again, like, it kind of does give us a bit of a 1950s feel where you just have like multiple TV screens all around. And that's how it was back in then. Because again, they're still a nation trying to recover from the rebellion. They don't have the resources yet. They haven't gone to that technological advancement as of yet. But yeah. We can see right here how everyone is watching the Hunger Games, how they're viewing it. We have the main big one, and then there's like the individual ones where all the tributes are going to be followed. Again, there's a lot of hints I want to really point out. Like, again, a lot of them have symbols on them because, again, a lot of things happened at the Capitol Arena. We can also see a couple of empty chairs with the mentors. Again, a lot of things happened during that whole sequence with the Capitol Arena. And we're seeing basically the aftermath of that. Like, we're basically seeing what's happening in between that Capitol Arena tour and the eventual, countdown to the Hunger Games. So yeah, that's what's happening right here. And yeah, I don't want to go into the spoilers of it, but that's just a couple of hints right there of what happened from that moment.
Ever host of the Hunger Games.
Okay, so yeah, the first ever host of the Hunger Games. The name sounds very, very familiar, and that is, of course, because he is an ancestor of Caesar Flickerman. So, of course, like, a lot of people would always want to see, like, the deep connections between the characters in this prequel to the ones that we see eventually in the 74th and 75th Hunger Games. But, of course, like, they never really go to... Like, a lot of people have been theorizing about whether or not Lucy might be related to Katniss Everdeen, but they never, ever, like, confirm anything of that sort. And, of course, like, with this whole story... It's really focused on Coriolanus Snow and his rise to becoming basically the President Snow that we see later on. Like, this is a movie that's basically showing his transformation that will eventually show us this more sinister President Snow. And of course, like, again, we don't see a lot of people who we would think are the ancestors of the characters that we do meet up later on with the 74th and 75th Hunger Games. But this is the one case we actually do get to meet someone who does have deep connection to someone that we've actually already met. And that is, of course, Lucky Flickerman, who happens to be the ancestor to Caesar Flickerman. And we do know that, Caesar Flickerman was also the host of the Hunger Games in the 74th and 75th ones. And again, it's very convenient that, he happens to have an ancestor, Lucky Flickerman, who also has, experience in hosting duties at the Hunger Games. So this was, again, a really nice touch to see. I remember just reading the text of him like, oh, Lucky Flickerman, I wonder how he's related, right? So that was a really nice job right there, just to see this deep-rooted connection between Caesar Flickerman and Lucky Flickerman. And I have to say, like, I have to give props to Jason Schwartzman, because he's playing Lucky Flickerman and he has to kind of show off a little bit of similar vibes, not just Lucky Flickerman, but his association with Caesar Flickerman, who was played by Stanley Tucci in the original Hunger Games and Catching Fire. And yeah, I mean, I gotta say, like, Jason Schwartzman is really nailing it. He's definitely giving off a little bit of the touch of what we've seen with Caesar Flickerman, giving off this charisma, but also giving off his own, like, duties of how he presents himself as the first host for the Hunger Games, at least in this one, because I'm going to assume that they didn't have a host in the previous Hunger Games. So he's basically is the first one to really, nab this job for the Hunger Games. So, and again, starting off this family tradition moving forward. So definitely a really nice job to include to this. Again, the reference is very clear, like how he's related, why he's in this movie, and why he's a big character in this whole series. So again, really nice job that we get to see right here with Lucky Flickerman.
Enjoy the show.
5, 4.
Okay, I want to stop right here because I know I talked a lot about the whole touring at the Capitol Arena. We saw in that previous footage where everything looked really nice, nothing was damaged. It looked it was, tip-top in shape. Here's the Capitol Arena now. You can see it's it's damaged, it's in ruins. You can see things about to fall down from the ceiling. You can see debris all over the actual games. So that should give you a hint of what actually happened in between the actual touring as well up until the game itself, or at least the final moments to go into the countdown of the games. Like, if you have read the books, you'll know for sure what happened in between. But in this case, like, we definitely see a different atmosphere, different aesthetic of what's happening with the Capital Arena, where they're all placed. But aside from that, right, you can see everyone is circled around basically the center, because of course in the middle is where all the weapons are. And if you know, this is where, everyone's gonna go and try and grab their weapons as much as they can to try and survive the Hunger Games, right? So, because that's the one thing they do offer straight up from the beginning of the Hunger Games. So this is not, so aside from like, how the setting is, location of it, one thing I have to mention, of course, is the outfits. You can see there's no coordination with it. There's just no specific outfit they have to wear. Like, remember in the Hunger Games, the 74th one, Katniss was wearing like a jacket with like what looked like kind of like a military style, pants, and then just a regular V-neck shirt. And then of course in the 75th one, they all wore jumpsuits, so they were all coordinated in what they were to wear for those specific Hunger Games, given upon what the locations are. But in this one, they did not have any of that, because again, like, they wasn't as well coordinated as the Hunger Games as we saw in some of the later ones, because then they didn't have the resources. They didn't really know how to plan out the things for it. This was the first one they really started to play out with the whole situation of how they're going to, add in the entertainment value for the Hunger Games. So things like gifts and sponsorships and, gambling and all that sort of stuff. Like, this is the first one where they're actually going full on with trying to make a reality competition. So they did not have any outfit coordination. They all are basically wearing what they're all basically wearing what they wore back in their reaping, and now they're wearing the same clothing for that in the arena. They were not offered anything to wear as like new, clothing. They're wearing what they had on previously. So you can see everyone circled around. They're ready to go into the Hunger Games, and the countdown's about to happen again. Lots of things about to happen, so yeah, can't wait to see what else we're going to see. I want to stop right here because this is Tigris. So Tigris is played by Hunter Schafer. If you don't recall where you see her from, she is from Euphoria. But yeah, I have to say, one of the characters that I really was not sure about who I would imagine, because of some of the things that we've seen before, is Tigris. Here's the thing with Tigris, she's actually one of the few characters aside from Coriolanus in this whole prequel that we've actually seen before, and that's because Tigris has appeared in Mockingjay. I believe it was either part 1 or part 2, but she does appear in Mockingjay, and we do see her briefly, but not in like a long extent. But again, she is the cousin of Coriolanus Snow. And yeah, if we all recall her, like, she definitely had, like, giving her name Tigris, right? She definitely had far more tiger-like features in the Hunger Games movie. Like, we see that very clearly. I think even in the text, Katniss even says that, oh, she has far more tiger-like features. Like, she looks like as if she has her own, like, humanized form of being a tiger or whatnot, right? And we see that in the movies as well. So I wasn't sure how they're going to show off Tigris in the 10th Hunger Games, just because I was like, we've seen her before, but how are we going to see her now? Like, of course, like as I said before, Coriolanus and Tigris didn't have lavish, lifestyles. They lived under their grandmother. They had to endure poverty. They didn't have a lot of, luxurious things to live by, right? So they weren't wealthy. So this was something that I was kind of like, okay, this is the one it was kind of like a wild card in terms of how she would look. But I think this is a really great way of really showing her, because one thing that is very clear is that she's very fashionable. She has a way of, telling what to wear, like what are some of the best clothing to wear. And I really see that fashionista sense coming from her, because she is very good at that. And that explains a lot of who we see of Tigris later on. But I think one thing I have to say is that in this trailer, we only see her twice in this whole trailer, but she plays a really big part of Coriolanus' life as well as his transformation. Like, for one thing, like, Dr. Gold is someone who's very sinister, who has really, like, suspicious, sort of skeptical, like, really sinister mindset into how she perceives, like, the whole entirety of Pan Am and how she wants to approach it. Whereas with Tigris, she's definitely someone who's far more innocent. She's all about the morality. She thinks about the goodness in things, and she tries, like, in a sense, she's basically the moral compass to Coriolanus, although at least she attempts to, because we know what eventually happens with Coriolanus later on, or we know what the outcome is, but she tries to be the moral compass. She's trying to be someone who can be influential to Coriolanus, to kind of think in the good side of things. And again, she's someone who's very innocent. I think she's one of the characters who I really do enjoy in this book, and that we're hopefully going to see the same happen in the movies, because again, she's someone who is very innocent, very nice, very sweet, and she all she wants is to see the best of Coriolanus, right? And that's something we really get the sense of here. And again, we don't get to see a lot of her in this trailer. I'm going to assume that maybe in a future one, or maybe in the second one, we're going to see more of her there, but we only get to see her twice. But I think Hunter Schafer is really nailing it, giving off this vibe of who Tigris is, and I can't wait to see more of her in the film, because I think, like, I hope that, you know, when we do get to the movies, that we get to see far more of Tigris, because I think that dynamic is really, really big, because again, she's someone who's trying to, you know, shift, trying to at least direct Coriolanus into this really good, you know, heart soulful side. And I mean, it doesn't work out the end, as we all know, but it's something that I feel like it's a really nice dynamic to see, at least when we're not just reading in the text, but I hope to see in the movies as well.
2.
This one is hard to see. I'm gonna say that this is a sequence that is happening in actual Hunger Games, because again, there's a lot of things that happen in the arena. This could also be an arena sequence, so again, a lot of things do happen from that, but I'm gonna assume that this is a sequence from the actual Hunger Games that we're seeing here. So I don't know what she's seeing or what is landing. It's really hard to tell. This is probably the most ambiguous scene that I'm seeing here, but it's got to be either one of those two moments right there.
Enjoy the show.
Run.
Oh man, I love this. Him just, you know, looking at the screen saying run. Like, oh man, one of the things I cannot wait to see with this Hunger Games is that we're definitely going to see a different approach to how they're going to view the Hunger Games, because at least in the original ones with, you know, Katniss, like, it's clear from not just from the books but from the movie that it's going to be far more focused on Katniss Everdeen. Like in the books, it was very first person perspective. It was a first person perspective through Katniss Everdeen, and that was basically the case that we saw in the original Hunger Games, like in the Hunger Games movies as well. Like, even though we do get to see a lot of the things happening behind the scenes, like whether it be like the game makers trying to make decisions, or seeing Coriolanus Snow watching the games himself. Even then, like, a lot of times when we do get to the sequences with the Hunger Games itself, it's mostly through Katniss, right? So it made far more sense why in that Hunger Games it was basically like 95%, or at least a good 90% coming from Katniss's perspective. But in this one, the book, like the prequel book itself, is coming from third person. So even though the book itself is more about, you know, very focused on the rise of Coriolanus Snape and his transformation, Coriolanus Snow and his transformation, and the rise of him going up to become this big figure, the thing is that we don't just see it from Coriolanus Snow's perspective. We also get to see him we also get to see the Hunger Games from other perspectives. So I'm going to assume that we're going to see a lot of jumps between Coriolanus and Lucy, because it's not just Lucy trying to survive the Hunger Games, but it's Coriolanus trying to make a big impact in the Hunger Games, trying to make him the star of something, and him having an impact and trying to, you know, rise to the occasion because of the fact that he's been a big integral part in changing the Hunger Games here. Like, he's the one who ideated about the, you know, the aspect of gambling. He's the one who figured out the idea of doing sponsorships, and now he's trying to do this where it's like, okay, because of what I have this deal with my tribute, I want to make sure that she wins. So this is going to be really nice to see back and forth of. That's going to be really fun to see. I wonder how they're going to try to execute that, because I feel like that's a really hard thing to do, because it made things far more easier just seeing everything from Katniss' side and then just having a couple of jumps here and there to see something behind the scenes. But here it's just going to be like, it's going to be a lot of back and forth. So I wonder how they're going to try and play out with that. But that's going to be something, it's going to be definitely a big question mark going into that whole sequence of the movie.
Enjoy the show.
What happened?
Okay, so we're basically getting the first interaction, or at least the first footage in this trailer of the interaction between Coriolanus and Dr. Gall. Because, as I said before, she's basically grooming him to become a very important figure in the capital, and that too in general Pan Am. There's gonna be a lot of interaction between them. Like, she starts to really get the vibe of Coriolanus. Like, he's basically becoming her, you know, favorite student in a sense, and we get to see a lot of that happening here. Like, this is the first footage where we actually see them together kind of talking, And as I said before, there are going to be a lot more interactions. This is just kind of a glimpse of it, but there's going to be far more interaction between Dr. Ghoul and Coriolanus, and how she's trying to like teach him the ways of how to think as like an important person. Like if he wants to be, you know, someone who wants to have a high position in the capital, this is how you have to think, right? And there's a lot of interaction between the two, and that's something that I'm going to anticipate we're going to see a lot of, at least in the beginning of the movie, because the first half I'm assuming is going to be a lot of the Hunger Games stuff, you know, getting up to that moment. So that's just one thing I wanted to mention, because again, there's a lot of things that's going on between Dr. Ghoul and Coriolanus. One thing I will say is that just by looking at the background, a lot of the chairs look empty, so I'm going to assume that this interaction is probably happening more so towards the end of the Hunger Games, so they're basically getting to the conclusion of it. It's very likely that this could be the end of the Hunger Games of itself, so lots of question marks there, of course. Like, this is it's really hard to tell where the scene is happening, but yeah, like, this is again a hint of what we're going to anticipate is going to be this relationship between Dr. Ghoul and Coriolanus. This is just a glimpse of it, and again, I can't wait to see how Viola Davis and Tom Blyth try to interact in their moments, because again, she plays a big part of his transformation to basically this, you know, far more sinister version of, you know, of Coriolanus, the one that we do eventually see as the, you know, the president of Pan Am, than the, you know, the more innocent person that we see early on in this whole, you know, book, or in this case the movie. So big things happening right there for sure.
Been in there.
Okay, so you can see again a lot of how they're, you know, executing the whole idea of giving out parcels, the gifts, offerings that they get from the sponsorships, that we're seeing a glimpse of that. From this scene alone, I'm gonna assume that this is just the beginning of the Hunger Games, because if you remember, there's a whole term called the bloodbath, because in the first moments of the Hunger Games, where everyone is basically either trying to hide or trying to get the weapons, this is where we have most of the tributes get killed. So this is where we have most of the fatalities occurring, like the early minutes of the Hunger Games. And I think that's what we're seeing right here. Like, you can see a lot of the tributes just attacking or about to attack. I believe it looks like to be Lucy from the backside. Or it could be a different moment, but there's a lot of things going on for sure in this case. And yeah, like, again, a moment in the actual Hunger Games where a lot of people are being attacked. So yeah,
Fueled with the terror.
so yeah, so with Lucy, she's basically like, again, she gives me a lot of Peeta vibes, because she's trying to think smart. She's trying to figure out how to win the Hunger Games. This is kind of the issue that we do see with Katniss, because she doesn't really think or doesn't try to be smart about how she plays the games. I mean, for one thing, she's a hunter, she's a survivalist, she knows how to survive. So, of course, for her, she wants to go straight for what is available resources that she can use to her advantage. But she did do this poor decision of trying to grab, you know, the material that we saw from the whole center of it all. And whereas we saw with Peeta, like, he ran and tried to hide, and this is a case that we're seeing with Lucy. Like, she knows right away that the best approach is to go hide right away. Like, she has a better chance of trying to survive from that than dealing with the bloodbath, the fact that this is where most of the tributes get killed, or a lot of people get killed. And yeah, it's a smart move right there, because again, because of the fact that Capitol Arena is now really damaged, it's really destroyed, a lot of things are probably open now. This gives us a moment to really just start hiding somewhere, and that's a case for not just for her, but for other tributes who are in this Hunger Games.
Becoming prey.
Okay, so here's a moment where we're seeing a lot of action. I feel like this might be some of the new footage that we might be seeing in this Hunger Games, because I feel like in the books, Lucy hid a lot. She didn't really have a lot of interaction. She went into a lot of hide and go seek vibes, because she was someone who tried to be a bit smart about how to approach the games. It wasn't all about trying to kill everyone, or I mean, she does kill some people, but spoiler, but yeah, she does kill some people, but yeah, but for her, like, the best approach for her was trying to hide and get what she can get, right? That was her approach going to this Hunger Game. That was her strategy, just to win. And in this case, like, I feel like this is probably far more new footage, because I don't think there was like a lot of sequences where we get to follow Lucy and her being attacked. I mean, she does get attacked in a lot of situations, but I don't ever see her, or at least I don't recall her being with a different tribute a lot of times. I'm going to assume that this is probably the male District 12 Jessup. But there's a big thing about Jessup that happens in the book. Like, there's a thing that they do mention, and it's like a big part of it. So I wonder if they change a little bit of that point in this one, because I feel like why would she, you know, carry, like, of all the people, who is she carrying? I feel like the only person that comes to mind would be the District 12 tribute, and or the male tribute, and so who she probably knows very well. So I wonder if this is definitely a bit of a change that we're going to see in the actual movie, because from what I recall in the books, like, she played a lot of hide and go seek, and something does happen to Jessup. We do get to see the male District 12 in the books, and it sounds like we're going to see him in the movies too, but this is definitely one I feel like it's going to be a big change. So we'll see. Maybe I'm just not getting it correctly, like where the scene is coming from. Maybe it's a different scene, or maybe she is holding on to someone from a different district, but this definitely seems like as if it's a different sequence than what we get from the book. So definitely one that I'm gonna be keeping an eye on.
See how quickly we become predator? See how quickly civilization disappears?
Okay, so I think what's really important is hearing what Dr. Gold is saying, because again, she's going to be very big in helping Coriolanus transforming into this more cold-hearted Snow that we see as the president of Pan Am. And we can hear just Dr. Gold like, just, hey, look what's happening. This is how civilization is. Just because, you know, this whole idea is wrong, we get to see kind of the true sense of who they are just by looking at the games. And that's what she's trying to teach Coriolanus, to kind of like open up his mind and realize that, you know, this is how they are. This is how, you know, they behave. And you need to now think in a way that is far more smart, far more intelligent. Try not to use your, you know, your emotions to get into anything that's happening. Think about what is smart, what is strategic, what is tactical, and not think about your emotions and things. And that's what Dr. Gold is trying to teach him, is that, hey, you need to be a cold-blooded killer. And so this is what it's gonna take to get to that point where you can be someone who has a high position somewhere in the capital, which he eventually does because he becomes the president of Pan Am by the time we get to 74th and 75th Hunger Games. So that's one thing I wanted to mention. Just hearing all that dialogue that Viola Davis is saying is very, very important. Okay, so I'm just stopping here because, again, we got to see a couple other footage with a tribute pulling out a flag, and I think this is a point where we start to see far more of the trailer kind of mixing in a lot of the timeline, because up to this point, this whole film, or like this whole trailer, has been very chronological, but by the time we get to here, like, everything starts to really be a bit more meshed up in terms of timeline. So a lot of things do happen from the beginning or from the end, from the middle, whereas from the start of the trailer to here, everything was very chronological. So the moment that we meet Coriolanus, what's going to happen, what their plans are for the 10th Hunger Games, seeing the reaping, seeing the tributes, the whole touring, the actual Hunger Games itself, that's all in chronological order. Up to this point, everything else is not in chronological order, so there's going to be far more mixed footage that we're going to see throughout the film. In this one, we can clearly see is District 12. So, yeah, you can see right there, District 12 right here. So, yeah, you can see the train is coming. You can see all the people working there. Definitely feel like it's definitely a different, like, you know, backdrop of District 12 than what we saw in the Hunger Games. So, maybe they had a different location, I don't know. Or, again, it could just be because of the fact that this was in, you know, the 10th Hunger Games. It was about, 64 years before the 75th Hunger Games that we do see with Katniss. So maybe that's why it's so different. As we all know, they're coal mining districts. So for that reason, they're one of the poorest districts in Pan Am, because, again, they don't have a lot of these resources. Whereas, you know, District 1 and District 2, they're luxury and weaponry. They're luxury and weaponry, so they have far more richer materials that they can use. It's one of the reasons why, with their, you know, tributes, their careers, they're the ones who typically win most of the Hunger Games, because they have far more resources. They have they even, like, train their children to, basically prepare for the Hunger Games because of the fact that they have the resources for it. So, whereas District 12 does not have that resource because they're very poor. And so, yeah, we've seen kind of the first glimpse of District 12, at least during the 10th Hunger Games. And yeah, we can see the train coming in. So I'm not gonna explain what happened. I'm not gonna say who won. I feel like there's kind of implication who won, but yeah.
There's a natural good.
Okay, so again, a lot of things to dissect here. So we're seeing again Coriolanus and Lucy. They're walking in the woods. They're talking. We definitely get to see a different Coriolanus because he basically got a haircut. All his curly hair has now been chopped. Lucy's no longer in her outfit from earlier. They're talking, they're in the woods and all that sort of stuff. So we get to see again, I think one of the big things I do need to mention is that as they're going through this whole, story, they do get very close. We see a lot of the footage later on where they're starting to really get really romantic, really intimate. And this is just a glimpse of it all because, again, eventually what is basically the Hunger Games, it definitely becomes a bit of a tragic love story. It is a very tragic one. Like, I wouldn't say it's like Romeo and Juliet tragic, but it's a very sad ending of what's going to happen. I'm not going to say what happens, like, specifically, but things do happen. And it's one of the things that, again, transforms and changes who Coriolanus is. This becomes the catalyst of what really kind of causes everything to what eventually, creates, the snow that we see in the eventual Hunger Games later on. So there's a little glimpse of that.
Goodness built into us all.
Okay, I think I might be able to figure out where this moment is. This might be right after the end of the Hunger Games, because he does get into deep trouble. I will say that. That's a hint I can give. I'm not going to say specifically what it is, but it does seem as if he has been caught for something. I will say there is a little bit of cheating involved. And so that's probably what's happening here, because, like, the fact that he's all by himself, like, that means something must have happened. Either that or he's meeting up with someone very late at night, because there's a lot of moments in the books where, like, book where Coriolanus is being called up a lot to the academy because of certain events that have happened, and not just with the whole touring, but a lot of things happen in between with him and some of the students. And again, a lot of things do happen because, again, for him, he's not just interacting with Lucy or Dr. Ghoul or Casca or Tigris, but he's also interacting a lot with some of the other students like Clemencia and Listeria and Sejanus. There's a lot of characters that he does interact with because, again, there are his colleagues, there are his classmates, and we see a lot of that happening. I think that's a lot of sequences that we're going to see later on in this part of the trailer, where we kind of see a lot of things that are happening, not just with the Hunger Games, but a lot of, like, the reality, the in-depth life of just people living in capital. So this might be just one of those footages as well, but I feel like this is one of those cases where we're at the point of the Hunger Games, or at least a point of the movie where he may have been caught by someone for cheating. And just, again, we're seeing peacekeepers, so that's what I'm guessing what the scene is, but it could be the case that he's just been called up by the academy just for a situation that happened. Oh man, okay, this is one I'm really excited to see because, again, we're going back into the actual 10th Hunger Games sequences here. A lot of things happen. So we're not just seeing from what happened to Lucy, but there are some things that, there's a pickle that happens with not just Coriolanus, but with another classmate, which we'll see in a second. But yeah, I'm gonna assume that who we're seeing here in the center might be Coriolanus. And that's just my guess because there's a lot of things that do happen there. Okay, yeah, so here it is. We see a sequence here where he's in the tunnel. Like, if you remember earlier on, a lot of the mentors and the tributes were walking through the tunnel that had, like, the red light in the all around, and then they're about to enter the arena. This is the same location that we're seeing right here, so this is how it's mapped out. But instead of, like, what we saw before, it's all torn, but we're seeing Coriolanus going into the games now, because a lot of things happen. We're gonna see in a second what it is, but yeah, he's in the games now. Something's about to happen. He's now involving himself because of a situation that has really caused a really attentive thing. I feel like now that I'm looking into it, the previous thing that we saw him where he is being brought up by peacekeepers, it's probably because he's being called up. So that makes far more sense right there. And again, it still goes with the fact that because of the fact that he is very interactive with some of his other classmates, even though he doesn't like a lot of them or doesn't really talk to a lot of them, he does have a lot of interactions with them. So that's something we're going to see a lot of, not just with, like, seeing Lucy in the games, but seeing Coriolanus and him getting involved with a lot of issues that are happening all around. So again, you can see here he's about to go into the games. yeah, a lot of things happen. So I'm not gonna go too deep into it. I'm just gonna only explain what the the actual footage is showing. But he's now about to go into the games for that reason.
Step across that line.
Again, another change from that moment to here. Again, this is implying that there's gonna be far more going on with Coriolanus. We're gonna see a bit of him with the peacekeepers and all that sort of stuff. But yeah, he's now with his hair cut off, so that's what it is.
Into evil. Or not.
Okay, so this is the first footage of him actually working as a peacekeeper. So this is very big. This is actually one thing that leads up to a lot of things that happened during the Hunger Games. So this is where he's at right now. Again, Casca Highbottom really hates this guy, so he plays a part of where of punishing Coriolanus, and that is putting him as key peacekeepers. At least in the sequence, again, like he's actually on duty at the moment. I don't know if this is directly from Pan Am or like directly from Capital, or if he's in District 12, but definitely seeing him, like, because again, from what I recall from the books, like he really did not like the lifestyle of being a peacekeeper. This is not what he wanted, and yet this is where he ended up being. And this also separates him from Tigris and his grandmother, so that plays a big part of what happens moving forward. But yeah, here he is. He's a peacekeeper. He's actually, lived a life of being a peacekeeper. So that plays a big role of his transformation going into, again, becoming who will now see a far more vicious, far more cold-hearted Coriolanus Snow that we see later on in the Hunger Games.
Not.
Again, you can see some of the footage here where, again, he's basically in his bunker. I'm going to assume that this is where he's now in District 12. He's banging because I'm assuming he got a package from his grandmother, who, again, like, there will be a lot of messages that they're sending, and they're feeling really sad. He's probably bummed out. He's really, like, upset with the events that have happened, and now he's alone. Again, we're gonna see, like, again, there's gonna be a lot of people we're gonna meet throughout this whole movie, or I'm gonna assume we're gonna meet. Like, I don't know how much of the content they're gonna cut out, because the book itself covers a lot of things. Like, it isn't just like, meeting the tributes and then the Hunger Games. There's like a lot of things that happen. Like, there's a beginning, middle, end. There's an aftermath of everything. There's a lot to really dive in. So this, like, I wonder what the runtime is gonna be for this movie, because it's so much material to cover. Like, whereas the original Hunger Games, like, it was straight up, okay, we got the beginning, we got the exposition, we set up the Hunger Games, we set up the fact that they've been, selected as tributes, we see some of the moments here and there, and then the rest of it's just the Hunger Games, and then that's it, and then we'll spend a bit of the victors and their victory and all that sort of stuff, and that's it. Whereas here, it's like, there's far more going on from beginning to the end, so it's not just this and the games, but we're going to see the aftermath of Coriolanus after the game. So we're already seeing a lot of that snippet here. Like, again, just from the fact that we're seeing his haircut is just a hint of that. Like, okay, we're seeing the footage of him after the games. And yeah, this is all what's happening here. Like, he's now a peacekeeper. So I wonder if we're going to see some of the people that he's interacting with, some of the other peacekeepers, so that they do go into some depth with that. So like, I don't think I actually saw any of the specific characters from the peacekeepers aspect. So I wonder if they're going to cut that out. So lots of questions about how the runtime's going to look like, how they're going to piece together a lot of things, what they're going to cut out, what they're going to add in. Like, again, the other sequence I feel like might be new footage could be the moment where we see Lucy running in a tunnel. So or like a basement of something. So that's going to be a lot of questions going into this. Oh man, I cannot even tell you the chills of watching this sequence. I'm not gonna say what it is, but I can say that this is happening right at the end of the book. At least from what I recall, was the end of the book. I know exactly what this moment is, and oh my god, just the fury coming out of him. It's so on point. It is so on point. I mean, you cannot be far more detailed with what this scene is. Like, if anyone has read the books, you'll know where the scene is, but I'm not gonna say exactly what happens, but I can say for sure is that this is coming straight up from the end of the book. Something happens. He looks very angry. He's shooting up on the skies. I'm gonna assume that. Oh, okay. I'm gonna keep my mouth shut for what I'm about to say, because a lot of things do happen. So, but yeah, this is. Oh man, this is going to give me a lot of chills when I see it in theaters, because wow, this is going to be such a powerful moment, because oh man, I can't even tell you. Like, this is kind of like basically seeing the full transformation of Coriolanus.
You hear that, boy? It's the sound of snow.
Okay. Yeah, so this is the first interaction that we're seeing between Casca and Coriolanus. Because again, like, as I mentioned before, Casca does not like Coriolanus. But again, he's probably like, there's a moment that's happening. I'm going to assume that, again, this could be a moment from the end of the Hunger Games or maybe his first interaction with him. It could be either or. But yeah, this is the first footage where we're seeing him interacting with Casca. This is going to be, again, a big part of what's going to happen later on, kind of the aftermath things, and how he's going to have a big vendetta against Coriolanus. But yeah, this is, again, a really sinister scene, giving off this really dark vibe of what's going to happen, giving us, again, this foreshadow of what's going to happen to Coriolanus because of the events of the 10th Hunger Games. That, again, we all know what's going to happen, but it's just leading up to that point, like giving us that visual of, okay, here's Coriolanus, here's how he was before the 10th Hunger Games. Here's how he's going to be after the Hunger Games. This is going to play a big part. This is going to be the trigger of who, Coriolanus ends up becoming. And we see the events of the events that really change up who he becomes. And so we're seeing a lot of that footage here. What this whole movie is going to basically showcase, display for us. Like, hey, this is what's going to happen to Coriolanus. This is his origin story right here. This is his rise becoming the presence Snow, the more sinister, vicious Snow that we know. So, yeah, like, I mean, a lot of things that I cannot wait to see.
Falling.
How wonderful.
Okay, so yeah, we're seeing a lot of other footage where, Coriolanus and Lucy are interacting. We can see the vibes of how they're getting very intimate. We also see a group that, they're with. That's the Covey. That's the people who, Lucy knows very well from childhood. They don't really go too deep. They don't go too specific to seeing those people. But again, kind of gives off the idea of how or who helped raise Lucy and all that sort of stuff. Here it is. We're seeing kind of the first footage of Rachel Zegler playing Lucy and playing with the guitar. This is a big moment where I feel like is one of the reasons why Rachel Zegler was cast as Lucy, because one of the things that they really play off is that Lucy is someone, again, who's a performer, and that's because she is a singer with the Covey. She loves to sing. That's a big part of who she is. And again, why explains a lot of how she kind of approaches things here and there. And here it is. We see a footage of her performing at, District 12 with her Covey group. And that's what we're seeing right here. You can see everyone around just watching them, enjoying their time, watching the performance from Lucy. And again, this is probably coming later on. But yeah, this is what's happening.
That we all get to be here.
Again, you can see like Coriolanus, he's watching her perform. You can see again how he's really getting close to Lucy, like far more than we ever would have imagined. Again, a lot of things are going to get down. It's not going to be pretty, but yeah.
For someone's.
Again, you can see a lot of other footage of them all having a great time dancing. Here's a footage right here that's basically from the first telecast of the Hunger Games, where Lucky Flickerman is interviewing all the tributes, trying to get to know them, trying to get them to win, the hearts of everyone in the capital. You can see right here, again, Lucy is basically in her wardrobe from her reaping, but she's now holding a guitar, playing with it. There's a lot of things that do happen leading up to it, how, Coriolanus gets the guitar. This is actually a very strategic thing that happens because, again, if you're going to be presenting, if you're going to be using the interviews, if you want to get the sponsorships, if you want to get people to support you, to gamble on you, to, make sure that you somehow win, increasing your chances, you need to make sure that you win the viewers' hearts. And yeah, it's not just something that Lucy does a very great job of, but this is something that Coriolanus really kind of becomes very strategic of. Like, he makes sure that he can make, Lucy look like she is someone who can win the hearts of everyone. And that becomes very big going into the Hunger Games. Because again, I think by the time we get to the 10th Hunger Games, she becomes a favorite for a reason. Like, I think some people even were starting to question whether or not she was even from the district, because a lot of people thought she was coming from the capital because of how, amazing her personality was and the fact that she's a performer. So again, we're just seeing a snippet of that. We're probably gonna have a far more extended footage of the actual interview situation itself. But yeah, this is something that I cannot wait to see. Like, you can see again, like over here, like donations, 1983. So that's probably the number of donations that they've received. We can see Lucy gray-baird's name coming from District 12. Again, everything that we already know so far going up to it, giving us a bit more of the context. And again, this is just an interview segment of it.
Final performance.
It's not just about.
Okay, so I mean, let me finish this.
Everything is about winning.
Okay, so this is big because this shows again the contrast between Tigris and Coriolanus and how they approach to life. Tigris is all about, you know, being ethical, trying to look into the good side of things, trying not to be greedy. Whereas Coriolanus is greedy. He wants to win. He wants to be the winner. He doesn't want to be the loser, right? And that's what he's basically saying here. Like Tigris saying it's all about winning, but you know, Coriolanus is like, but it is all about winning. This is how it's going to get me to this moment, this part of my life where I can now become a respectable person in society, right? And that's something that his grandmother has always wanted him to be, of course. And you can see the contrast of it. You can see how Tigris is truly trying to get to Coriolanus, trying to get him to think straight that, hey, it's all about the winning. You have to like understand the consequences of things, and that's not what. And Coriolanus does not want to deal with that. And we see a snippet again of like kind of a much more darker side of what we're gonna see of Coriolanus. Like he's all about the winning, and that's gonna be a big thing. And that is only one of the two scenes that we get to see in this trailer of this interaction between Tigris and Coriolanus. I mean, this is actually the only footage that we see of them interacting. I feel like hopefully we'll see far more of them talking, conversing with one another, trying to get into the depths of like again what they should think of society, because I feel like that's something that I felt I really enjoyed just reading about them in the books, just their interaction and seeing the contrast of their personalities. And again, this is only one of two footage that we do see with Tigris, but I hope to see that in the movie we get to see a lot of that footage. Again, I don't know how they're going to really approach it, because again, of the fact that the book really covers a lot of things, from you know A to B to Z. It's a lot of things that they have to cover, and so if there's anything I'm a bit worried about, it's going to be the runtime. Like I'm going to assume that we're going to at least anticipate 2 hours and 30 minutes of this movie, because there's just so much material to cover. And hopefully, again, we get to see a lot of, like, even if they're going to make some changes, we at least get to see a lot of the heart of what we got in the books, like, big important things from the books, and then we get to see in the movie. Now, having said those scenes, here it is with the, the sequence about the snakes. So we're about to see far more of what's going to happen here, but yeah, here are some muted snakes that Dr. Ghoul had created. You can see how colorful they are, how I believe it's like kind of a mix of like eels and snakes, so you really get this vibe of them, you know, looking very colorful but also very scary. They're very, very scary creatures. And you can see Dr. Ghoul going up to, you know, check out on her snakes. So this is her latest invention of mutated animals, and man, they're gonna be big. Like, I'm gonna say this, they're very, very big. They're very, very important for this Hunger Games, because a lot of things happen. There's a reason why it's called the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, hence the snakes. Yeah, these are mutated snakes, so this is going to become a big, big part of it, so definitely keep an eye on that. Okay, so yeah, so here is Dr. Ghoul. This is straight up from the book. But here's Dr. Ghoul presenting her mutated snakes to Coriolanus and Clemencia. So I totally forgot to mention about Clemencia, but yeah, this is Clemencia. I think she's probably the closest person that we see to Coriolanus in terms of their interactions. And that's because, again, like, I think they do an assignment together. They do a lot of things of trying to figure out how they're going to improve on the Hunger Games. And we see, again, Coriolanus kind of giving off a lot of his dad vibes, where let's do the gambling, let's do the sponsorship, let's do the gifts. He's really embodying his father in terms of really going all out with the Hunger Games, and we see it here. Like, again, as I mentioned before with Casca, this happened with Casca, and we get to see a similar vibe of Clemencia when she is approaching this assignment that they have earlier on. And this is something like this happens, I think, right after they turn in the assignment. So a lot of things do happen here. So yeah, Clemencia is with Coriolanus. I think there's anyone who's very close to Coriolanus is Clemencia, just because of how much they interact in the books itself. Like, they have a lot of moments together. So I'm not surprised that we're seeing it here. We even see her earlier in the trailer as well. So since introduction there, something really dark and something very dark and grim happens in this moment. We're only just seeing the beginning of that sequence, but something does happen right after. I'm not going to say what it is, but we know that right after something does happen. It's something regarding with their assignment. There's a little bit of lying involved. And yeah, it's a very, very hard thing to, like, I can't even imagine how they're going to execute this scene, because it's going to be something that's going to be really hard to watch on the big screen, but I'm assuming that's what that specific scene is going to hint about. So yeah, I know exactly where the scene is for sure, and it's not going to be pretty to watch. You monster! Okay, we're seeing Sejanus Plinth. So he's going to be another big character associated with Coriolanus. Yeah, there's a lot of things that happen with Sejanus. Sejanus is someone who, okay, so just to describe him, right? Sejanus is actually one of the few characters that we meet in Ballads that, you know, they're not capital born. They're actually from a different district. He's from District 2, so that's weaponry. And if you recall a little bit of the first rebellion, like, because of the fact that, you know, District 2 is basically known as, you know, the weapons district, they have a lot of influence, and of course they were far more in support. I mean, I wouldn't say far more support, but I would say for one thing, like Sejanus Plinth, his family, his father played a big role in the first rebellion, providing weapons to the capital. So because of that, Sejanus Plinth was kind of, you know, his family was able to move to the capital, get a new life there, not be, not make sure that their kid does not, you know, ever get reaped in the Hunger Games because of the fact that he is from District 2, but because of the fact that, you know, his father played a role in winning the first rebellion, that they're basically being gifted to, you know, go into the capital, live there, and whatnot. So unlike some of the other, you know, mentors that we're dealing with, Sejanus is someone who's far more sympathetic towards the tributes. He feels so sorry for them. And not like I'm saying that the other characters don't. Like, there are far more other mentors who feel like they just feel sorry for these people, far sorry for these tributes. But if there's anyone who is very, you know, against everything that's happening with the games and really vocal about it, it's Sejanus Plinth, because of the fact that, again, he has lived in District 2. He understands what's going on. He knows people from District 2, right? Just to see, again, some of the people that he knows, you know, being reaped for the Hunger Games and seeing them get killed and die, whatnot, right? So, of course, like, he is someone who's very vocal about it. He's against all of this. He's going to be someone who's going to raise his voice. That's becoming a really important part about it. Again, like, a lot of things we're going to see, again, like, he's going to be the big rebellion going into this whole Hunger Games, this 10th Hunger Games, that's, again, going to lead into Coriolanus getting very involved. Again, we're seeing Sejanus here. Let me play a little bit more. Okay, so here it is. Again, he's yelling. He's very angry. He's basically saying that everyone here who's involved is basically, you know, horrible people. They're all, they're all involved in this. Like, there's a lot of things. Like, he's expressing a lot of anger. One of the things that I have to also mention that it's really funny because if you remember West Side Story, the newest one from Steven Spielberg, like, of course, Rachel Zegler was in that movie as well. This actor, I believe, played Chino from West Side Story 2. So it's really, I mean, for one thing, I would say I don't think they're going to have a lot of, like, Rachel Zegler and this actor, I don't think they're going to have a lot of, like, you know, moments together because, again, he's far more occupied with his tribute, and Coriolanus is far more involved with Lucy. We might see, like, maybe one scenario where they might have a shared, like, moment, but that's just because they're all in, like, the same area, or two in that case, like, because they're all in the same area. But aside from that, I'm not expecting a lot of interaction between him and Rachel Zegler in the film. But that's Chino. That's basically Chino. So that's basically Chino. And he's basically, again, screaming at the people who are responsible for creating the Hunger Games, that they're all awful people. They all deserve to kind of be punished for just basically creating something as sinister as this. But yeah, like, that's something I wanted to mention because, again, he's actually a very important side character for a side character, and he's going to be someone who, again, becomes a really big issue for Coriolanus because, again, they get really deeply involved. But at the same time, like, I will also say this, that because of his association with Sejanus, it also benefits him in a big way later on in the film. Like, I'm not gonna say what it is specifically, but there's gonna be something that, you know, as a consequence of his involvement of helping out Sejanus, that, you know, there's gonna be a deep connection between his family and the Plinths. I just want to rewind back a little bit because I have to say, I have to talk about this because seeing Viola Davis giving off that sinister laugh, oh my gosh, she is nailing this role. She is 100% spot on with giving us the subtle, sinister vibe of who Dr. Gall is. And she is spot on. She's a masterclass. She's giving me, like, just hearing her laugh is giving me the chills. Like, as I said before, as she's described in the book, she definitely gives off this crazy scientist vibe, and she's really spot on with not just her looks, but just really expressing it out just from her performance. I mean, I cannot wait to see her in this movie. Like, I'm just in awe. Like, I have to say, this is probably the most perfect casting I've seen with this whole film. I mean, she's gonna be like the star of this. Again, we're seeing far more footage of him as a peacekeeper. It seems as if he either is about to train or he's about to arrive in his camp in District 12. It could be either one of those two scenes. Again, probably, like, we're seeing a far more footage of him with the peacekeepers, because again, that's a big part of his transformation. Looks like he is meeting up with his boss, or with his commander or whatnot. And then, of course, like, the training session of it all. Yeah, again, this looks like this might be him training as a peacekeeper, because again, he does end up there as a result of what happens at the 10th Hunger Games. This is an aftermath of it. All his hair's cut off. We see all of that. Again, we're getting a glimpse of what is far more towards probably the third act of the movie. Oh man, this one is gonna give me chills, because if you compare this to some of the other things that if you were to compare this Snow to some of the other things that we've seen, right? He looks far different. He looks super different. And I can tell just from the scene that we're at the end. Like, this is probably at the very end of the movie, because he gets so transformed. He becomes this far more sinister, very cold-blooded, very evilish Snow. Someone who only cares about himself, the wealth, the prestige of trying to be at the highs of high, trying to get the best position in capital, trying to be someone than just being a person who was an orphan living with his grandmother and being a student at the academy. I feel like this is where we're seeing the full transformation, the full essence of who Snow is. This is basically it. This is what we're seeing is, I believe, is the ending of the movie, where I would say he kind of returns back to the capital, reunites with his grandmother and his cousin, and it becomes a full-blown transformation for him. He becomes a far more different person. And just, again, the hint of it is because of the haircut. The haircut here, like, it's far more smooth. It's not as the curly hair that he has when he went into, like, trying to prep for the Hunger Games. It's not the, the buzz cut that we see him where he's, training with peacekeepers and working for them. This is a far different Snow, where it's like, it's clear that he's now finally starting to become a far more influential person living in the capital, and it's going to make a big difference of what's going to happen moving forward because of his actions during the 10th Hunger Games and his ideas and the things that he's done. And again, all the grooming from Dr. Gall, that's going to play a big role in his position going to this point. So very, very sinister thing to watch. Very chilling stuff to see. Again, this is just a hint of what could be the ending of the movie right there. Again, as I mentioned before, snakes are a big thing. Lucy loves snakes, so I hope that kind of gives a bit of a hint of what's going to happen in the Hunger Games. At least a lot of the footage that we have seen together, like kind of putting in the pieces together, what happens. She loves snakes. She loves playing with them. There's even an actual moment that happens early on the book when she was reaped that involves a snake. I don't know if they're going to replicate that or not, but this is definitely kind of happening later on, of course. And yeah, she's playing with snakes. I believe that is not the poisonous one. So this is not the poison one.
It's the things we love most that destroy us.
I have to say, hearing Donald Sutherland's voice saying that, right, it's very chilling. I mean, it's really nice to hear him because it's been so long, because he's basically originated, Coriolanus Snow in the original movies, and now we're seeing a movie where we start to see the rise of Coriolanus. And I mean, just to hear Donald Sutherland just saying those words about how love is basically what's going to destroy them. Yeah, as I said before, this is going to be a tragic love story that's going to happen. It's not just the Hunger Games, but it's a tragic love story. And that's the sense of what we're getting here. That's basically because of what we see throughout this whole, situation, this whole timeline in the Hunger Games, where we do focus on Coriolanus and his rise and his transformation, his change, the shift, his whole personality, right? Like, it's because of his love that's going to make him who he is eventually because of everything that happened beforehand. And yeah, this is gonna be a very powerful thing to hear. Like, I don't know if this is, again, from what I recall, this actual quote may have been said by him, I think in Mockingjay, if I'm not correct. I want to say it's either I feel like it's Mockingjay for sure, because again, he does says this to Katniss in that moment, the exact same quote. And yeah, he's making a point about it, and now it's like, okay, it's basically kind of like he's having a lot of, like, one of the funniest things that having to hear that coming from Donald Sutherland's voice is kind of like, again, giving him a reminder, like he's gaining basically flashbacks of dealing with a different girl from District 12 who he, in a sense, kind of fell in love with, and seeing how all that impacted him and becoming this person that he is by the time he gets to 74th Hunger Games. And now he's dealing with Katniss, who definitely, even though they couldn't be any more different, definitely gives off this similar vibe of like rebellion, someone who, because of what she has done with Peeta and Gale and all that sort of stuff, right? Like, you can see like how there's definitely some similarities going on, and how he's trying to beat that. Like, he's beat it once, he can beat that again, and now it's like it's basically kind of something that's going to come back to bite him. And I mean, just to hear that quote, I mean, it couldn't be any more powerful. It couldn't be any more potent. That's how amazing, like, this whole trailer is just really well done, just giving us implications, giving us the similarities of how, again, giving us a sense of who Coriolanus is and how he changes so drastically as a result of these events. And I have to say, like, this is just one of the pieces that we're going to see, like, again, leading up to who Coriolanus is. I mean, when I read the books, I definitely was like, wow, like, I would never imagine Coriolanus to be like this. And I mean, I know a lot of people were kind of like iffy about having a, prequel that's so focused on Coriolanus because of how horrible he is. The things that he's done is terrible. Like, he's killed people, like he's a dictator. He becomes a dictator. He is a dictator, right? Like, why do we want to have a story focused on him? And of course, like, I think at the end of the day, what we're seeing is basically what became the triggering point of who he is, what basically set off the chain of reaction afterwards because of these moments, what basically sets up and builds up who is Coriolanus in, Hunger Games universe. And so yeah, this isn't just because, like, he may be the protagonist doesn't mean that he is the hero of the story. Heroes and protagonists could be very different things. I feel like a lot of people don't understand that just because a protagonist is a leading character doesn't mean that they are the exact hero. I wouldn't even say that he's a tragic hero. Like, he's just, like, we definitely get like a sense of, like, I wouldn't say Michael Corleone, but definitely someone who starts to get a bit more darker, like kind of having a bit more of the essence of Michael Corleone because of, the things that have happened in his life. I still won't say that he's a tragic hero. He is definitely not a tragic hero. But this is a tragic love story. And again, we see this transition of who Coriolanus becomes, and it's going to be very incredible just to watch all these sequences leading up to, again, this big moment of who Coriolanus becomes. And I don't know if they're going to show any footage or at least like foreshadow or show anything that we see of the future of the Hunger Games after this whole timeline. But again, just I'm looking forward to seeing this. I think Tom Blyth, or Tom Blyth, however you say his last name, but Tom, like, the actor, I mean, I just say, like, he's really embodying who Coriolanus is. I think he's definitely has the subtle touch of how Donald Sutherland has, portrayed his character, has characterized him, has basically given off who Coriolanus is in the actual Hunger Games. And now Tom is, like, the actor is really just trying to do the same thing, giving off that subtle touch of who we see as a future leader of Pan Am, but also giving its different taste of, again, this is a different Coriolanus that we saw before the Hunger Games, and giving us that aesthetics of it. And I have to say, I'm so excited to see this movie. Again, I don't think there's any other footage afterwards, but yeah, so that's basically the end of this breakdown for sure, just going through the trailers. But having said everything that I've said before, like, again, I have to say, I'm super excited to see this trailer. Like, having seen the footage from beginning to the end, it seems as if a lot of it's coming directly from the books, although there are two sequences. I'm going to say, like, I'm not sure how much they're going to change from the books, because, again, they could try to make things spicy in terms of how they're going to execute the games itself. Because again, the way that we view off from the actual Hunger Games, there's a lot of things that do kind of jump around here and there, between Lucy and Coriolanus's perspective. I mean, even though it's far more third person based, a lot of it is focusing on Coriolanus and his rise to becoming this really despicable person. And yeah, I mean, that's something that I'm going to be looking forward to seeing. That's basically the end game we're going to get. That's going to be the outcome. There's no denying it. We already know what's going to happen. So even with like the events that happen throughout the games that I try not to spoil about, we still know what's going to happen at the end, is that he's about to become this person who's going to be this sinister, very, self-centered, who only cares about power, who's power hungry, right? We're going to see that person by the end of this movie. And we already get to see a glimpse of that throughout the trailer. And we, again, see a lot of that throughout the books. And I'm not really surprised about it. But, again, this is going to be very interesting to watch in theaters. I'm very excited to see it. Just from the trailers itself, there's far more of a darker, grim vibe of it comparison to the other Hunger Games movies that we've seen before. So I'm expecting that we're going to see far more violence, far more of this, darker essence to how they're approaching this whole film. I wonder how the rating's gonna be for this. Like, I mean, I'm gonna assume they're gonna try and 10 to PG-13, but we'll see how that goes. But I think the biggest question I have going into this is how the runtime is gonna be, because it's so much material to cover. Just to not just get the Hunger Games, but just again to see this change of who Coriolanus is. And again, like, I'm going to suspect it's going to be a very long one, because, again, there's a lot of things to cover. Like, I'm expecting 2 hours and 30 minutes of footage. I don't think this is going to be a movie that's going to be break apart. I think it's going to become a singular film of itself. So I'm not going to see I don't expect anything where we're going to see far more of Coriolanus after this film. Like, I don't believe that. Like, in the prequel, it's just this one book, the 10th Hunger Games. We meet Coriolanus, we meet Lucy, and that's it. There's no extension of that story. It's just this one singular prequel, and that's what I'm expecting the movie's going to be the same case. But yeah, I'm so interested to see it. I'm so excited to see this movie. I can't wait to compare the stuff from the books to the footage from the movie itself, and how they try to execute a lot of things. But yeah, I think that basically wraps up everything I have to say about this whole trailer, my breakdown of it. Again, I hope that has helped a lot of y'all just to, understand a lot of what's going on in the scenes, whether or not you've read the books or, are just, waiting to see the film. I try not to go too deep into spoiler territory, but I mean, there are a lot of cases where I had to really kind of explain a lot of things that are happening in this whole trailer, just because, again, like, this is a trailer where they really give us a lot of everything from the beginning and end of the prequel book. I hope that's educated a lot of you, like, at least give you a better sense of how this movie is going to be, especially those who have read the books. Like, hopefully that's giving you a much better idea of how the sequences are going to look like as we get into the movie, as the movie does come out in November later this year. But yeah, that's all to say about it. I cannot wait to see it. I think Rachel and Tom are brilliant as their characters. I think, Peter Dinklage and Viola Davis look spectacular as their characters. I hope by the time we do get to the next trailer, we get to see more of, Coriolanus' family, especially his grandmother, because, again, we don't see her in this trailer, but we do get to see Tigris. Maybe we'll hopefully get more of this interaction between Tigris and Coriolanus. I'm going to maybe assume that we're going to see a far more darker vibe of Coriolanus, kind of giving us a bit of that foreshadow in the second trailer that we do get. Whenever that does come out, of course. Maybe we're going to see a bit more, a deeper insight into Lucy and her life as well. So, I mean, I know this is going to be a very hard movie to really not show off too much spoiler stuff, because of the fact that the book has, done a lot of things that are just, again, covering a lot of stuff. It's going to be hard to really avoid spoilers, but even that being the case, I cannot wait to see the second trailer, do a similar reaction video as well as a breakdown for it, because, again, I have read the books, and yeah, I'm in love with the Hunger Games, so I'm just excited to go back to the Hunger Games universe once more after, like, so many years. But yeah, that's all I have to say about the Hunger Games. That's my breakdown video right there. Let me know what your thoughts are. Has my video helped you out? Like, did you enjoy this aspect? What do you look forward to seeing in the second trailer? What are some things that you wish, that you maybe have spotted that looks like it could be a different sequence from the books that I may have missed? If so, let me know in the comments down below for that. What are some things that you're really excited to see from the sequences? Have you read that books themselves? And if you have, What do you think about the trailer? Have you, dissected a lot of things? Like, do you agree with some of the things I've said before with some of the sequences here and there, especially ones that look a bit more ambiguous? And yeah, are you looking forward to seeing the movie? Let me know in the comments down below and make sure to like and subscribe.